Good evening, you're watching Estuary TV News. Coming up, opening lines of communication, broadband in West Lindsey, and all aboard a new train service for Brig. And I'll be talking to James Dunn about business in the local councils and today's budget. Welcome to Estuary TV News, I'm Hugh Richards. First of all, it's over to Richard Morris for the news headlines.
Hello there. A Grimsby judge has quit his job after viewing pornographic material on his judicial IT equipment. Andrew Moore has quit his job before disciplinary action could be taken. The Lord Chancellor and the Lord Chief Justice would have removed Mr Moore had he not quit himself, the Judicial Conduct Investigation Office has said. A ward has been closed at Grimsby Diana Princess of Wales Hospital due to an outbreak of diarrhoea and vomiting. Ward B6 is closed to new admissions until the infection passes. Dr Peter Cowling, who is the consultant microbiologist for the trust in charge of the hospital, says that although the bug is unpleasant, it only lasts about 24 hours. People are advised to remain away from work or hospital for 48 hours once they have been symptom-free. Police are appealing for information after a disagreement in a car park. An argument took place at Tesco Extra in Cleethorpes at Hewitt Circus over the weekend. The men were involved in a disagreement over a parking space. It's said that one of the drivers struck the other driver. The man was driving an Audi and was in his early 40s, 6 foot tall, stocky build and with short, fair hair. Anyone who witnessed this incident at around 3:30 p.m. on Sunday afternoon are asked to contact Humberside Police. A woman has been charged with the murder of Bridlington man Graham White on the 27th of August 2014. Mr White sustained a fatal injury in the town following a disturbance in the early hours of the morning. It was reported as an isolated incident which involved two groups of people who were both known to one another. Two men have been charged with fraud and a burglary in Louth on Friday the 13th of March. The incident happened down Swallow Drive. One of the men has been remanded in custody, the other has been bailed and will reappear in court at the beginning of April. Residents are being invited to meet the author at Hull Central Library. Northumberland-born author Stephanie Butland will be previewing a new novel, Letters to My Husband, before its release. She'll also take part in a question and answer session with the audience at the library on Thursday the 26th of March. That's all from me for now, and I'll be back with more news soon. Don't forget, if you've got any news for us in the meantime, please call us on Grimsby 01472 31553. We're also available on Twitter at Estuary TV, or you can search us on Facebook. Bye for now.
We use broadband every day. It's become a necessity of modern life, but the technology has failed to reach some rural areas. Dave Nunn is picking up a signal deep in the countryside.
Broadband is a modern necessity, but some people in rural communities struggle to get it. Now a Hull company is bringing it to West Lindsey.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the type of technology that it is, a lot of people are very familiar with the standard internet connection that you get through wiring through the ground. And then equally, a lot like you get satellite connections, a lot like Sky, etc. We kind of sit in between that, so we don't broadcast to satellites. We literally work on a point-to-point basis to mast sites around the country, or which we can place en masse or on the top of buildings or anything like that. The present project that we're working on around West Lindsey is actually heavily involving churches, so we're working very closely with them to allow us to put masts on their roofs, because essentially they're the higher point within the villages, really.
Just like we saw at Ryby Church, the technology is specially tailored to providing broadband in Lincolnshire.
No, not at all. The only complications that we tend to come up against really is obstacles that are in our line of sight. Unfortunately, we do have situations at the moment where we may be able to connect one household, but the neighbour may have a big tree in their garden which obviously blocks the way that we need to connect. But equally on the back of that, because we've recognised that, in terms of the rollout that we're doing across Lincolnshire, we are using a slightly different type of technology, which not only allows us to provide up to the 50 meg speeds, but it also allows us to penetrate objects such as maybe the smaller dense trees, whereas previously that would have caused a problem.
The benefits high-speed broadband provides to communities will connect those to the network who are often missed out on other occasions.
What we've seen through investigation is that Rural villages do not get the benefit from upgrades that you generally see from other providers. It's normally heavily clustered within the towns or cities, and then as soon as you start to come away from there, the broadband speeds fail or are just drastically reduced. With ours, our ability, we can obviously quickly deploy in those areas and equally transport that at relatively low costs. We're not having to dig up the roads or anything like that. It is literally, as daft as it seems, a case of just fitting a small dish to your property, aim it at one of our masts, and then we're able to pipe those super fast speeds to you, really.
As ever, James Dunn is here to sum up the schedules in our council chambers. And James, I think the internet has been tabled.
Indeed, yeah, it seems a perfect time to talk about the internet in Hull, which anyone who lives or has been to Hull will know can be a problem depending on the area that you live in. So the first thing I'd like to discuss is obviously Thursday, that's tomorrow. It's a full council meeting. That's in Hull's Guildhall. It starts at 10:30 a.m. There's sometimes long ones. And one of the first issues to come up is actually the internet. Now, as many people may know, that Kingston Communications have somewhat of a monopoly over internet provision in the city. It's very different to many other cities. But what they've actually set out is a rather utopian vision. I'd like to read out the last sentence before the first, as it were, but it says, the council therefore pledges to work with local internet providers to establish free Wi-Fi hotspots across the city, okay, with an aim of providing free Wi-Fi first to the entire city centre, then further afield to encompass the whole of Hull. So free Wi-Fi for all, that's the overall aim.
That sounds excellent, yes.
Well, I mean, who would object to that?
Well, worth moving to Hull, I'd say.
Perhaps for many people. I mean, basically what they do is, in this report, they compare Hull to many other cities. First, places like Kuala Lumpur and San Francisco or whatever.
Not the natural places you compare to Hull.
No, not your average comparators. But then in the next paragraph, it does actually admit that actually when you compare it to smaller cities or similar cities, places like Blackburn, for example, which probably is a fairer comparison, even those cities have a better provision than Hull does.
And Hull has a history of being a great sort of on the forefront of communications technology. This is the town of the white telephone box, not that anybody uses telephone boxes these days.
It certainly does, it certainly is, but I don't know, is that kind of where it started, this sort of sectarian communications provider?
Well, I don't know, James.
I'm speculating now, obviously.
It's a nice story though if they pull it off.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's the Nobel Peace Prize winner. That if you could bring it to entire humanity, free Wi-Fi for all.
Do you happen to know how often Kingston upon Hull is mentioned in Kuala Lumpur City Council?
I'm afraid I have been there, but no, it's
okay.
not as far as I'm aware.
Right.
So the next thing that's going to come up is fluoridation. This is another fairly controversial matter that's been discussed at length. Essentially, the council put it on the agenda, said, should we add fluoride to the water supply? Could be better for people's teeth. There was a lot of objection from many groups saying, well, probably the most convincing argument was that it would cost a lot of money, but actually might not be the best way to convince children to look after their teeth. So many people said that education would be a much better idea and a much more cost-effective.
Fluoridize the water
perhaps
and
you can,
educate.
although what the council, I think, is essentially saying now is perhaps maybe we won't do the fluoridation thing because it's a very wide net to cast upon a very small problem.
James, we have much more business to talk about a little later. Don't go away. We'll come back to you.
I won't.
You're watching Estuary TV News. A little later in this programme, we explore more local lingo in What You Say.
The gaffer. Well, it's got 2 or 3 connotations, that.
And the extremely busy James Dunn will bring you all the sports news. Trains are one of the driving forces of the British economy, moving goods, workers and visitors from place to place. But in Brigg, many residents feel cut off from other places because of their limited rail service. Campaigners have been fighting to reconnect the town to the rest of the country, and this week they got a step closer to their destination. Northern Rail's managing director visited the town to discuss working together for improvements and agreed to look at what it would take to extend the service. James Dunn, once again, is on the platform.
Here I am on the platform at Brigg train station, but a train won't stop here today. That's something that a campaign group are trying to change, and if they can, they believe it will mean a great deal to this town.
Well, obviously it means quite a lot to Brigg. Obviously the railway line as a whole is 72 miles long, so communities on the line for the last 21 years have suffered. It will bring obviously people to come in to shop, to spend money, education-wise and obviously job-wise. You know, people can go up to obviously Immingham. There's going to be some new factories built up there. Grimsby, they can go across to Scunthorpe, and it will just open up the whole area for everybody to travel.
Since 1993, trains have only stopped here on a Saturday, but for the last 2.5 years, the Friends of Brigg and Lincoln lines have been campaigning for better services, and passenger numbers have risen 16%. Yesterday, franchise Northern Rail met with the group along with North Lincolnshire and Brigg Town Council to discuss the future.
Well, you only need three things to run a train service. You need some track, you need a train, and you need some train crew. And clearly all of those things cost money. So this line is primarily used for freight, and the opening hours of the line are focused on making sure that the freight services get the access they need. So one of the constraints we have on this line is level crossing signal boxes. That all means people, which means money. The line's actually going to due for be re-signalled in 2017, which will make the business case for service enhancements easier. The next thing we need is a train, and one of the reasons why this line only gets a Saturday only service is because we have the trains available on a Saturday and we don't have them available Monday to Friday because they're used for commuting in the main urban centres. And then we need some train crew, and train crew are relatively expensive. It needs to be paid for, and we've committed today that we'll see how much that would cost to go from 3 trains on a Saturday to 4 and see how that could be funded.
But if the campaign group are to convince Northern Rail to invest in Brigg, they'll need residents to get on board. What can people do to help you out?
Well, obviously to catch the trains. As I said, we're always realistic. The trains may only run on a Saturday, but you can still get to places. Obviously from here you can get to Grimsby and Cleethorpes, down to Worksop and Retford.
More business in Hull Council. James, what else is coming up?
Well, I was looking through the agenda, and the next thing that comes up is a very long paragraph, or a few actually, and it's a motion proposed by Labour, which essentially says how much better Labour is than the previous Lib Dem council, which they would say.
Well, it would be surprising if they didn't.
So they say, you know, aren't we so much better, even though it's now a coalition government, so haven't we done well? And then I just sort of saw lots of Z's come down the page. And so I thought if you do want to miss a section of the council meeting, perhaps that might be the one to miss.
There are people who are fascinated by this, including me.
Certainly. Well, I mean, it is interesting politics, but the thing is, it's also predictable, really.
Sure.
And the next thing that they discuss on the agenda is trains. So obviously this has been a long time issue in Hull. So they've been talking about Transpennine rail franchise. According to a new proposal, there is no contractual requirement for the provision of a minimum of 2 trains per hour between Hull, Leeds and Manchester. Although it's open to bidders, so what the council are saying is that they will back that, and they'll be making efforts really to try and put pressure, maybe not pressure, but sort of lobby for that to happen with new bidders.
You'd think there could be 2 trains around, a train every half an hour running from Hull just at least as far as joining up with the main East Coast line.
Yeah, I mean, what they say is that this new proposal doesn't really recognise the increasing significance of the region with the energy estuary, this increasing significance that it will have in the future. And I think it's probably a fair criticism, and perhaps their course of action here is probably the right thing to do, just perhaps highlight that to the important parties, and maybe it can be done with a little bit of a softly approach.
And there's a literally parallel story, of course, going on the South Bank, where Scunthorpe, Grimsby and Cleethorpes have a very, very slow connection to the main East Coast line at Doncaster and the rest of the network there.
Exactly. I mean, it's happening in the region. I think all of the local authorities and Humber Lep, they've all got the same idea. Let's just shout about the area, tell them why we need this, and hopefully we can make the business case for
your story about Brigg is
exactly
case in point.
Very similar thing. The next thing on the agenda, which is also political but a little bit more interesting, is the Lib Dems have put forward a motion asking Hull City Council, their Labour administration, not to spend £200,000 on consultants for a new ice rink and a new swimming pool. Now, sounds maybe not so interesting in itself, but I mean they've criticised a previous decision where they spent £500,000 on consultants to help bring a battleship to Alexandra Dock, which didn't happen in the end. You know, a valiant effort. But what their main criticism is that it's pie in the sky, because they've set out 200,000 in this budget for consultations into these new buildings, but there's no actual money allocated in the budget to build these buildings.
So they've money budgeted for consultants to advise on how to build buildings for which there is no money.
Yeah, I mean, it's to be confirmed. So where the money will come from to build these buildings, the Lib Dems say is ridiculous, and basically there are bigger priorities they should be concentrating
Would it not be better just to have a contract with an engineer who knows how to build a swimming pool and an ice rink, rather than a consultant to tell you how to find an engineer who knows how to build it?
But it would probably breach tender protocols.
I see. Okay, James, that's all we have time for this, but still, please don't go away, because I want you to tell me about the budget that's happened today. Time now to explore another of our local idioms in What You Say. This week we ask, what is a gaffer? Roll tape.
The gaffer. Well, it's got 2 or 3 connotations, that. Use one for fishing. Gaff, it's a gaff that... The gaffer is a boss.
Who's the boss? Who's the boss? Yeah.
I am, definitely.
The landlord of the pub?
The boss.
Well, I presume that's the boss, isn't it? Or he's in charge?
The boss.
Him, that's the boss. The gaffer's the boss of the pub, yeah.
We continue the James Dunn Show. He's still with me, but now we're going to slightly open up our vision here and talk about the budget. George Osborne's been speaking today at the Dispatch Box, Chancellor of the Exchequer. What has caught your eye?
Well, indeed, national story, but local significance because it affects everyone. It's how the government will spend our money, essentially, in the next... Well, that's an interesting one that remains to be seen, I suppose, doesn't it? Well. Probably the big announcement for people in this area would be a £1.3 billion pledge for support for the North Sea oil industry. So anyone who works within North Sea oil here will know that the falling oil prices has caused real problems for the companies. They've been talking about laying off workers, stifling investment, and it's had a big impact on these companies. I don't know how it will go down with the wider public because oil.
I find it difficult to feel sorry for oil companies.
I think so. And I mean, if they told oil companies what they've told Labour, that you should have maybe put a little bit more away when the going was good.
Fix the roof when the sun shines. Yes,
which he used in today's speech. That very phrase. Then maybe things would be different. But the fact is, they have announced this support. They've also pledged that next year the petroleum revenue tax will reduce from 50% to 35%. So I'm not sure how the rest of the country will feel about these pledges, but certainly in this region, perhaps it might be beneficial.
Now, will that reduction in taxation be reflected at the pumps? Will the retail price of oil be going down as we fill our tanks?
Obviously, I don't work for the oil company, so it's not really for me to say, but I would probably predict no, because what this pledged support is to do is to help them invest more in the oil industry, because they're saying that they're suffering at the moment because of the low oil prices. So if they're suffering, I really do doubt that they would reduce the price of oil any further.
Worth remembering that the oil companies are massive employers. A lot of people's livelihoods depend on those companies succeeding.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Nationally, that might be unpopular. I'm not entirely sure, but certainly for this region, can't necessarily be a bad thing, because we know and have friends and families who work in that industry, and they will be, because of the low price in oil, no doubt a little bit concerned about their livelihoods, and probably understandably so. And hopefully, this might help put their minds at ease.
What else has he said?
Well, the other big story is the end of the paper tax return. He's famously coined the phrase that tax shouldn't be so taxing.
Yes. Yes, that doesn't actually mean anything, does it?
Not really, but it's a good soundbite.
It's a sloganising oxymoron.
Yeah, indeed. So, the end of the paper tax return. And also he's talked about devolution of the regions, although probably won't mean that much for people around here, because I think he was talking in terms of Manchester, which is one that he mentioned at length. The final thing to mention, as I'm sure you're aware, is that tomorrow we've got an accountant coming on.
We have, yes. We're coming into Jackie Lee, I think it is, isn't it?
Jackie Hall from Baker Tilly. So they are working like Santa's elves right now, trying to work out what the actual budget will mean for their customers' pockets.
But Santa's elves give us things. These people are telling us how much is going to be taken away from us.
Well, but these are accountants, so maybe they'll be trying to limit how much is taken away.
Excellent. Well, I always look forward to talking to an accountant, because I always seem to understand, if only for 5 minutes, a little more than I did before I've been speaking to them.
Oh, we'll look forward
anyway,
to that.
We'll look forward to that. James, as if by magic, you are now going to go and present the sports, because Dan Kemp's not here. Off you go, swiftly.
Hello, in today's sport, North Ferriby United won 4-2 at Solihull Moors last night, which is the club's third successive win. Jason St Just, Ryan Kendall, Liam King and Josh Wild were all on the mark for the Villagers, who are now in 10th position in the Vanarama Conference North. Some of the biggest names in cycling will take part in this year's Tour de Yorkshire in May, including former Tour de France winner Sir Bradley Wiggins. The first stage of the race is from Bridlington to Scarborough, and the teams were announced today. As well as Wiggins, former England cricket star Matt Pryor's team will be in the saddle, as will celebrated Paralympian Dame Sarah Estuary. It will be shown on live TV and follows the huge success of last year's Tour de France Grand Depart, which also went through Yorkshire. Hull City have 2 weeks to resubmit an application to change the name to Hull Tigers. It follows an FA report this week that ruled owners the Alams did have the right to appeal last year's decision. In golf, an incredible chip by Cleethorpes pro Holly Clyburn is among the 5 nominees aiming to pick up the Ladies European Tour Shot of the Month for February. It was her third shot of the 7th hole at the RACV Ladies Masters. However, Holly is against fierce competition. On Saturday, Grimsby boxer Kevin Hooper goes head-to-head with Ben Wager in the final eliminator for the English lightweight title at Barnsley Metrodome. That's all from me, but I'll see you next time.
Thanks very much, James. You have earned your salt today. Just time to remind you that tomorrow I'll be joined by Jackie Lee from Accountants Baker Tilly to work out the consequences of today's budget. How much is it going to cost us? If you've a story, as always, please go to our Facebook or Twitter pages. Details are on the screen. Email news@estuary.tv or phone Grimsby 3155553. Until tomorrow, good evening.
Hello and welcome to Estuary TV's weather. Early mist and fog Thursday. Cloud lifting to leave a mainly dry day with light winds and some decent sunny spells for many, a maximum temperature of 10 degrees. Friday, perhaps some breaks at first, but then rather cloudy with a chance of rain.